Okay, I'm happy to start. So welcome everybody and thank you all for joining this evening. I told Robertson Bixen's panel that I prepared this share for something else last year, so I thought that might be of interest to the ladies of the community. And it's talking about Lot. So I thought it'd be fun to call it Lots About Lot. Was Lot really being hospitable? So first of all, I'd like to dedicate this Le'ilu Nishmas, my husband's late grandmother who passed away 20 years ago, Chana Bas Elazar, Mrs. Forscher, who was a member of the Hendon community, and Refuah Shlema to Diane Ehrentreu, Harav Chanach ben Blimela, and the emeritus chief rabbi, Harav Yaakov Tzvi ben Liba. This is based on an idea I heard many years ago from Esti Kimchi Segal. Please keep yourself muted, but by all means interrupt, ask. I'm happy for interaction and challenges and questions. Whatever you want to contribute, I'm sure it will make it will enhance the ideas that I'd like to share with you. And I'll try and monitor the chat, but I can't promise you because it's really hard to look at 3 different places at once. So people are quite familiar with the story, but we'll go over the story. There was a handout that I sent out on the shul ladies WhatsApp group. So I hope everybody who wants it can reach it, because I can't really now send it out. I should have thought about that in advance. But for the people who don't have the handout, prefer to hold something in their hand, we're looking at Berieshis Perek Yutes. Okay, Lot seems, we're going to read the story in a minute, but Lot seems incredibly hospitable. And he lives in a town called Sodom. And Sodom is like the archetypal town for inhospitality, people who just don't know how to behave nicely and they don't want to make their guests welcome. So I'd just like to start by running through the story, just a few pesukim, maybe 8 pesukim from the story, and then we'll look at it in details. So it starts like this. So for people who can see, someone give me a thumbs up if they can see the handout on the screen. Yeah, okay, thanks, Jacqueline. By the way, for the people who want to, you can make the handout bigger to see it or make it smaller. And if at the end, if you put your email address in the chat, if you want the handout, I can send it to you afterwards. So here we go.
Barbara, it's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just say it's great on the screen, thanks.
Hi, Barbara. Okay, so Vayovohu Shnei Hamalachim Sodoma. So the 2 angels who've come from Avraham visiting him after he had his bris milah, they went to Sodom, Ba'erev in the evening. Velot Yoshev B'shar Sodom, and Lot was sitting at the gates of Sodom. Vayar Lot, and Lot saw this. Vayokom Likrosom, Vayishtachu Apayim Arza, and he sees them, runs towards them, and he bows down to the ground. And he says to them, "Hey, do you want to come and hang out with me? Come to my house, stay overnight, wash your feet, get up in the morning and go on your way." And they say, "No, we'd rather sleep in the street." And he urged them very greatly, and they turned towards him, and they came to his house, and he made them a great feast, and he cooked them matzah, he baked matzah, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house from young to old, all the people from the edge of the city. And they called to Lot, and they said to him, "Excuse me, where are the men that came to you last night? Bring them out so we should know them." Now, just to say a side point is that to know them is, Rashi tells us, they wanted to sodomize them. Vayetze alehem Lot, and Lot went out to the men, pescha, to the door, bahadelet saga acharav, and the door shut behind him. Vayomar, and he said, Al not achai tareu, my brothers, do not behave so badly, do not behave wickedly. I've got an idea. You cannot touch my beautiful, precious guests, but, Posuk 8, Hine no li shtei banos, I've got 2 lovely daughters, and they are young maidens, they've never been betrothed or married to anybody, and you can do with them whatever you want to, except these men that have come, please do not do anything to them, because they have come under the shadow of my roof. Now, this is like quite perplexing, because here we have someone who's Lot, lovely guy, he's doing everything he can to invite these 2 people in his house, but nevertheless, he offers up his own daughters when the lives or the well-being of his guests are threatened. He says, "You know what, leave my guests, they are holy, we'll find out that in a minute, and don't do anything to them, just please look after, just have my daughters and don't do anything to these men." This is very, very strange. So what I'd like to do is look through the story in a little bit more detail. And on the sheet that you've got, if you've got it, I hope you have, the first person we're going to look at is Sforno. He was an Italian commentator. He died around 1550, something like that. So we've got the story, and Lot is sitting in the gates of the city, and he sees the visitors come. First of all, he's sitting in the gates of the city, which is quite a nice thing because he's sitting waiting for the opportunity to invite guests. We'll talk about that. Vayokom likrosom, and he gets up to meet them. Why does he have to get up to meet them? Sforno asks. Source 1, pen yolinu barachov, in order to prevent them sleeping. He didn't want them to have to sleep in the street. Because the prevalent custom at that time was not to allow people to come and stay over. The people of Sodom were very not nice, and they did not want visitors. And all the surrounding neighborhoods, they were not hotels in those days. Maybe there were inns, but in Sodom, there was no inn. If there was an inn, the inn was shut, and they didn't want to let people stay over. They didn't want to encourage visitors to come to their town. And if a visitor would come and sleep on the street, who knows what would happen to them? Maybe they would be abused by the townsfolk, or maybe there would be wild animals or something. But basically, it wasn't safe for them to sleep in the street. And Lot went out of his way to get up. Vayokom likrosom, he got up to greet them. He wanted to prevent them from sleeping in the street. So, bit strange, but very understandable. He then tells them, I'm just going to scroll up to, I should really have it next to me. He says to them, suruno, which is very strange expressions like turn about to come here. What does that mean, turn about to come here? So, 1 second. Now, if the prevalent custom in Sodom was to discourage the hospitality, you can understand Lot has got a very good reason why he'd want to tell them, suruno, turn aside. Look what Rashi says. Akmu es haderech levesi, derech akaloson. Don't go directly to my house. Let's sort of go the circuitous route, because shelo yakiru she'atim nichnasam sham. He didn't want the people who lived in the city of Sodom to see that Lot was bringing guests into his house. So he told the angels, he wanted to do hospitality, but he said to them, don't follow me, just sort of like pretend you're just going about your own way so I won't get into trouble. And so I'd love you to stay, but just don't get me into trouble. So we can sort of see, strange, but again, understandable. And number 3, Rashi, he says to them, Vilinu virachatsu raglechem. Stay overnight and then wash your feet. Interesting order. If someone would come into your house, would you say to them, stay overnight, don't take off your Wellington boots till the morning? It's like a bit of a strange thing. Okay, Rashi asks this question. Is it normal, is it usual that a person should sleep overnight and then wash their feet? I suppose have a shower. Elo, but kach amar Lot. Lot said to himself, Im kesheyovo anshe Sodom. If the people from around the neighborhood come banging on my door asking me who these people are, Viyiru shekvar rachatzu raglechem, and they see that my visitors already had a shower and their hair's brushed, they already moved in. Yalilu alai, they will make a charge against me. Vayomru, and they will say, Kvar avru shnei yomim o shlosha, v'shebo'u beisecha v'lo hadatanu. You've already had these people staying over in your house for 2 or 3 days, and you never let us know. Lefichach, Lot sort of said to himself, therefore, Omar, he said to himself, Mutav sheyisakvu kan ba'avak raglechem. It's better that you should stay in my house, that you look all dirty and shabby, and if they challenge me, I'll be able to say to them, you've just arrived, and I haven't had time to tell you that these people have arrived. It looks like you've just shown up. So that's why, according to Rashi, he says, stay overnight and then wash yourself in the morning, because Lot didn't want to get in trouble with the people of Sodom. Sorry, I didn't scroll up. I will move forward. Why were the people of Sodom so disgusting to visitors? Why did they want to fend off visitors? And for that, we have to ask the Ramban, who tells us, Kavanasam lakalos es haregel mibnehem. They wanted to bring an end to visitors coming to their town. Kedivrei Rabbeinu, as the rabbis tell us in Gemara Sanhedrin, ki choshvu sheba'avod tovas artzam, because they lived in a lovely land. And the Medrash tells us that a person would like pull out a carrot from their ground and a diamond would come up. They had such rich, fertile soil. I think it's metaphorical. It was a beautiful place. Yovo shom rabim. They were worried that lots of people would come along. And they didn't want to have people coming begging or moving in and taking the riches of their land. Vehem mo'aseh hastaka. And they despised giving charity. They were not willing to share the wealth that was bestowed upon them with other people. So what they thought they would do is put people off sufficiently to stop people coming, that everyone would say, like, don't go there, whatever you do, and that way they could keep the wealth to themselves. Nevertheless, underneath these very strange circumstances, Lot was hospitable. Very nice, okay? And he offers the angels things to eat, and he offers them a mishteh. Very nice, you might say, very nice feast. But what does the Sephorano tell us mishteh has got connotations of? Mishteh, source 5, Seuda al hayayin. We know that on Purim we have a mishteh, and a mishteh comes from the word shasiyah, lishtos, and basically it means we're eating, but it's like your meal is secondary to the alcoholic beverage. And how do we see this later on? Lot was a person who loved to drink. V'hiyos hayayin ahuv etzlo. We know later on Lot gets drunk at the end of the perek, and he loves wine. So we see something's going on here, very nice. He's offering them food, he's offering them drink, but he said, I'm going to make you a mishteh and making you an alcoholic beverage party. And this is what I already alluded to at the beginning. The story starts to unravel. Very nice. He's trying to go out of his way. He comes from a town which is not classically hospitable, but he goes out of his way to invite guests. He gets up, sits at the gate of the city. Very, very nice. All seems very lovely until we see the last verse we spoke about at the beginning, where he offers up his very own daughters. You can look at that posuk again. He says in Hebrew, Hine no li shtei banos asher lo yodu ish. Here are my two daughters who've never been with a man. Otzion no eshem alechem. I will bring them out to you. Va'asu lahem katov be'enechem. And do what you want, what's good in your eyes. Rak ha'anashim ha'el al ta'asu davar. Don't do anything to these men of God. Don't do anything to them. Ki al kain bo'u b'tzel karasi. Because they have come under the shelter of my roof. Now, Ramban, I'll scroll down, it's source 6. Thinks this is very, very strange. And he says the following. Mitoch shivcho shel ha'ish hazeh. Sorry, thanks Rivka for the message. I've scrolled up, it should be better. Mitoch shivcho shel ha'ish hazeh. We see out of the praise of this man, Bonu lidei ganuso, we can see that his behavior isn't so nice. It's quite reprehensible, in fact. Shehayot harach ma'od al achsanya shelo. He was all busy inviting his guests and looking after them, lahatzilosom, to save them, mipnei shebo'u b'tzel koroso, because they came under the shelter of his roof. Avol sheyafayes anshe ha'ir behefker benosov. But when he offers to appease the men of the city by giving away his daughters so they can be promiscuous with them, ein zeh imro'a lev. There's nothing good about that. It's all evil-heartedness. For it showed shehaya inyan hazima benoshim meruchak be'enav, because treating women in an inappropriate manner was not disgusting in his eyes. Velo haya oseh livnosov chamos godol, and it didn't really bother him that he was doing a great injustice to his own daughters, kafi dato, according to his opinion. Lachach omru rabosenu. The rabbis tell us in the Medrash Tanchuma, Banohag sheba olam. It is natural for a man to conduct himself. Odom mose atzmo al benosov, ba'al ishto. It is completely usual for a father to do everything he can to look after his own daughters and his wife. V'horeg o neherag, and he would rather be killed or kill for the honor of his wife or his child. V'zeh, we're talking about Lot, Moseh benosav lehitz olel bahem. He gives up his own daughters so that they can be abused by the mob. That's very strange. A person who's so hospitable, he's not even hospitable to his own, he isn't kind and caring to his own daughters. And the Ramban says, this is strange hospitality to me. You're so hospitable to your guests. What did somebody tell me? There's a thing called family hold back. When you've got like food and you've only got like a few chocolate mousses left, you say family hold back. That's one thing, family hold back, but you don't like offer up your children to be abused by the mob to like put your guests first. So why did Lot put himself at risk and put the lives of his children at risk to appease the mob? So for that, we're going to look at Rashi on the first pasuk, where it says, Vayar Lot. Lot saw the people coming to the city. And Rashi says, I'll just scroll up 1 second. Source 7, Mibeis Avraham lamad lachsar al ha'archim. Lot learned from the house of Avraham, he learned to look out for strangers and invite guests. I'm just going to pause there. If anybody wants to make any comments, please unmute yourself or you can write something in the chat. In summary, we've looked at the story. Lovely, Lot lives in a strange place. He goes out of his way, puts his life at risk, but he's willing to sacrifice his daughters. Rashi says that he learned from Avraham how to do hachnasas archim. That is amazing. The problem is he copies Avraham, but he doesn't quite get it right. Now, when I showed you scroll up. When I showed you the Rashi in source 3 about the idea of making the people pretend like they just arrived, so they shouldn't have a shower or wash off the mud from their boots when they arrived, so he could pretend to the people who lived in Sodom that they just arrived, I left out a little bit of the Rashi. I left it out on purpose, ... And now I'm going to show you what Rashi said. Source 8. Rashi says, Avram amar lahem techila rachatzu raglechem. In Perek Yud Ches, chapter 18, the Perek just preceding the story about Lot, we see the story about Avraham where the three angels come to him. The three men come to him, and he says to them specifically, Rachatzu raglechem. Before they do anything else, he says to them, wash your feet. Now it's interesting that Rashi brings Avraham from the Perek before to help us understand Lot's behavior. And so I'd like to now look at what Rashi says on the Perek before. So the Perek before is the story of Avraham recovering from Bris Milah. And three men come to Avraham, and he doesn't know who they are. He assumes they are Arabs, visitors in the desert. And he says to them, I'd like to do hachnasas archim. Please come in. It's after his bris milah. He's suffering from the after effects. It's the heat of the day. And he still does everything he can to try and make his guests comfortable. But he says to them, V'rachatzu raglechem. First things first, please wash your feet. Let's look at Rashi, source 9. V'rachatzu raglechem. Kasavor shehem Aravim. He thought they were Arabs. Shemishtachavim la'avak raglechem. It was perhaps customary in those days for Arabs or Arabians, wherever you want to translate that, to bow down to the dust of their feet. We don't know what that means, whether they actually bow down to the dust of their feet, or perhaps it's metaphorical, almost like they thought where they'd just come from or where they were going to was so important that they sort of almost worshipped where they'd come from, or they were like thinking, I'm so marvelous where I'm coming or where I'm going. But either way, the hikpid shelo lahachnes avoda zora leveso. Avraham was very careful that he shouldn't allow Avodah Zarah to come into his house. So therefore, the biggest priority for Avraham, if travelers came to his house, he would say to them, please wash your feet. It's almost like wash your hands. I know we're thinking now coronavirus, like, don't come in my house without washing your hands. But Avraham was thinking, take away any idolatrous thoughts or practices away from yourself, please, before you come into my house. But, Rashi says, Aval Lot, Shelo Hikpid, Lot was not particular, even though he had a very good reason, according to Rashi, why he didn't want to get caught by the men of Sodom. Hikdim lina l'rachitza, he put first sleeping before washing. Shene'emar v'linu v'rachatzu raglechem. So Rashi is looking quite carefully at what Avraham did, and he's comparing and contrasting Lot's behavior to Avram's behavior. Now, the handout's very long, but don't worry about it, because what I'm going to show you now, I'm just going to try and change my screen to make it smaller. 1 second. Remind myself how to do this. Yeah, okay. I don't know if you can still see my handout. You should be able to. Yeah, okay. What I've done is I have put side by side the chapter of, on the right hand side, here's where my cursor is, right? This is the story of Lot in Perek Yud Ches, and this is the story of Avraham in Perek, Lot is Yud Tes and Avraham is Yud Ches. And I've put the stories side by side. And I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes to look at the story yourself. I hope you can see the screen carefully enough. For the people who are able to see it in Hebrew, I gave the handout in English, so there's also this exact sheet is exactly like that in English. Just give you a couple of minutes to look through, and I want you to look for similarities and differences. And then I'm going to talk about the similarities and differences that I found. So I'll give everybody 2 minutes to have a look at that. Okay, have I got any brave volunteers to say something that they've seen? Anybody brave enough? You can write it personally to me in the chat.
The first thing is that Avraham Avinu sees men, Lot sees angels.
Okay,
So
thank you very much. So we'll just, I don't know who said that, but thank you very much.
Rochelle Goodwin.
Sorry, hello? Rochelle,
Rochelle
thank you. Okay, so we can see it says Shnei Malachim, first of all, there's two of them, two angels, V'hinei Shlosha Anoshim. Okay, but you'll see there's lots of similarities, and almost like Chazal are pointing us in the right direction to say to us, look at the stories, look at how similar they are. They're one chapter apart, compare and contrast. Anything else? Some things are to do with the language and some things are to do with other things, but by all means, anyone who wants to make a suggestion.
Chava,
yes.
Yeah, Chava, it says Lot sits by the Beshar Sodom.
Okay, look in Hebrew, it's Yoshev Pesach HaOhel. Oh, sorry, yeah.
No, that's Avraham. Avraham Yoshev Petach HaOhel.
Okay, the same word in Hebrew is written, Yoshev.
But he's at the Petach of the Ohel and he's in the Shah Sodom.
Right, look how similar that is, okay? It's the same language in Hebrew, Yoshev. It's easier to see in Hebrew, but it works in English. I tried to translate it as carefully as possible to try and make it more obvious. Anybody else want to be brave? Okay, what's the time of the day?
One's evening and one's the heat of the day.
Right, but isn't it interesting that it bothers to tell us, here's kachom hayom, and then it says, and the other one it says bo'erev. It's like as if, you know, the time and place is given in both, okay? Right. Okay, what about this? I'm gonna delete those because otherwise there'll be too many things to see at once. And anybody who wants to have a color-coded thing, I can send it to you another time. I'll just delete those just to show you some of the things. So we see Avram's kachom hayom, and it's so similar. It's like, okay, what about this? Vayar lot vayoratz likrosom. Can we find a parallel to that in the Avram story?
Vayarat.
Okay, look at this. Vayar vayoratz likrosom. It's almost the same language, but look at that. What's it telling us? Vayar lot saw vayokom likrosom. He got up to see them. Nice. He had to get up. Maybe he was hiding. Maybe he was like hiding behind like a tree at the entrance of the city. But Avraham vayoratz likrosom. He gets up and he's ready to go, eager to do hachnasas archim. But the language is the same. Can we see that? Vayar likrosom. Okay. Right. Another one. Let me think. Okay. So we already know. That the Lot does vilinu rirachatzu raglechem. And when it comes to Avram, let me see where it says it. Here, virachatzu raglechem in Pasuk Daled. Okay, so the same language is again there. Okay, what about the reaction when Avraham? I'm going to get rid of this all again. What about the reaction when Avraham and Lot see the angels? So I'll show you one and then see if you can see something very similar in the other one. Okay, so when Avraham sees Vayishtachu, Vayishtachu arza, he bows down to the ground. Something similar in the Lot story?
Okay,
Okay, can you see how it's like as if Chazal, Hashem has obviously written the Torah, one second, but Chazal are begging us to look at the two stories. The question is, one second, try to highlight, it's not really so good at doing this. Okay, Vayishtachu apayim arza, what's wrong with that? So Avraham bows down, but you know, like when we do on Yom Kippur, we literally prostrate ourselves on the ground with your face to the ground. That's like as if almost like a symbol of someone. Maybe we know that's how Muslims pray. They put their face to the ground. We only do that in the Beis Hamikdash. And Avraham sort of bows down to them, down to the ground, but Lot does with his face to the ground. It's almost a bit like quasi the shape of an idol worshipper. Okay, what about just like one or two other things? What about what food was offered and what food was served with Lot and with Avraham?
Chava. I was going to make that point. We just hear that Lot makes a mishter, that's all. But with Avraham, he takes a whole lot of trouble. He sends for this, for the butter, for the.
Okay, true, but we do know what's on the menu in Lot's house. Okay, have a look.
Yeah, and Avram just says, "Yukach nom at maim," just take a little bit of water, a morsel of bread. Promises very little, offers just like basic sustenance.
Okay.
But provides a lot more.
Okay, but what does Lot actually give them?
He gives them wine. He gives him the wine.
Right. What else did it say? He gives them matzah. Okay, no one wants to eat matzah. No, I'm joking. It's like fast food. It's almost like not takeaway. It takes 18 minutes to make, right? But Avraham says, let's just a little bit of water be fetched and nothing. And I'm going to give you pas lechem, like a tiny bit of pita. Okay, that's what he. And then when actually it comes to, we'll talk about that afterwards. About Avraham, that he offers them. He actually delivers a much more extensive amount of food. Okay, so can you see there are actually loads of other things, but we can't go through them all now, but there are lots and lots of comparisons in the story. The question is like, one second. Yeah, I'll go to source 10. 1 second. This is, I can send this to anybody who wants it. It's like a color coding of like the food, and every category was color coded in a different color. As I said, I didn't prepare this all for sure. I did it for something else. Let me just make this bigger so it's easier to see. Okay, so now we have to ask ourselves, what are Chazal trying to tell us by comparing and contrasting these two stories? They're side by side. What is Chazal's message here?
He's telling us that that Lot, he lived with Avraham, so he watched him and he learned lots of things from him, but it was superficial. He didn't understand Avram's motivation. He just saw what he did, so he didn't really understand the true his true hospitality, his true hachnosas orchim. Whatever he saw him do, he just copied it.
Thank you, Shari. Would you like to take over now? Thank you. No, absolutely fantastic. Lot is doing something, we call it mimetic. He's copying what he sees. So if someone doesn't go to school, a little child doesn't go to school, they just watch their mother or father doing things at home and they copy. That's how children learn. So Lot is learning, but he doesn't get it, because otherwise he would never, ever have offered up his own daughters. He's going through the motions. It's like a person who does something, but they don't understand the action. The little child, they're learning to daven, they don't know what they're doing. They're just sitting there like this. It doesn't mean anything to them. The words don't mean anything to them. They're just copying what they see. And we'll see time and time again, Lot is copying what he saw without having the right intentions and without having the right mindset. So he looks like he's hospitable, he's doing things that he learned, but without having the right mindset. Let's look at Rashi, source 10. He's asking, why is it that they were called Anoshim for, why were they called men for Lot, but Malachim for Lot, but Anoshim for Avram Avinu? So Rashi asks that question because he's doing the comparing and the contrasting all the time. Etzel Avram, source 10, Etzel Avram shekocho gadol, Etzel for Avram whose power was, strong, v'hoyu malachim tedirin etzlo. He sort of had, angels were sort of hanging around. The Shekhinah was there all the time. So the angels were quite, ordinary for him. They got called ordinary men. Aval Etzel Lot, korom malachim. Lot, with Lot, they were called malachim because he could see that these people were extraordinary people and they were very out of the ordinary. This was something unusual. There's an idea also that if Avraham was in the presence of the Shekhinah, that compared to the Shekhinah, the angels were not, so to speak, so powerfully spiritual. That's the only best way I can describe it, compared to the Shekhinah. Whereas around Lot, the angels were unbelievable compared to the people around them at the time. So somebody mentioned the differences between the food that Avraham and Lot prepared. So we see that Avraham tells his wife, Asi ugos, he tells Sarah to make cakes, and he takes a posat ches, chem al v'chalav, uben bakar. He made loads of food. But Lot does mishter, which is alcoholic beverage, matzos afar v'yachelu. All he did was, he offered them a feast, but in fact, he just gave them matzah. And from here we learn, Gemara Baba Batzia, source 11, Shesadikim omrim ma'at v'osim harbeh. Sadikim, they keep their mouth shut. They don't promise things. They just keep their mouth shut, and they do lots. But wicked people, omrim harbeh. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and they're never going to deliver. Va'afilu ma'at einom osim. They don't even do anything. And we know that also more famously from Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos Aleph Tesvav, Emor ma'at va'aseh harbeh. Say a little and do a lot. You don't have to publicize and tell everybody what chasodin you're doing or whatever it is you're doing. You have to keep a low profile. The classic example of saying a lot and doing a little would be Ephron, who says to Avraham in next week's parasha, you can have a few shekels between me and you. You can have it for free. And then when it comes down to it, he says, well, thank you very much. I'll have 400 pieces of silver for the cave of Machpelah. So going back to Lot and being influenced by Avraham, the Rambam, Maimonides, in the Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Deos, says the following and talks about the power of influence and the power of environment. And he says the following: Derech brioso shel Adam lios nimshach b'deosov u'b'ma'asov achar reov. It is very natural for a man to have the tendency to be influenced in his ideas and his conduct by his friends and associates. V'noheg k'minhag anshe medinosov. And it is almost inevitable a person will behave the way that the town that they live in. They blend in with the town that they live in, and you follow the habits of people you spend time with. Lefichach, tzarich adam lehischaber letzadikim. It is important for a person to attach themselves to tzadikim, v'leishev etzel hachachomim tomid, and hang around, so to speak, with wise people, kedei sheyilmod mima'asehem, in order that he should learn from their deeds. Vayisrachek min harashaim, and you should keep yourself distant from rashaim, from wicked people, haholchim bachoshech, that walk around in the darkness, they're almost blind to the right way to live, kedei shelo yilmod mima'asehem, that you shouldn't copy and live like them. And he goes on so far as if you can't find somewhere where you can live, you should rather live as a hermit sorry, 1 second. You should rather live as a hermit. 1 second, let me just get that back. 1 second. You should rather live as a hermit than live in a place where you will be badly influenced. And we can see not only Lot's behavior in Sodom, offering up his own daughters, was terrible, even though he mimicked Avraham Avinu in the hospitality, but he didn't quite get it right. We see later on in source verse 14, which is when we see Lot's descendants, who were Ammon and Moab. Later on, we find out when the Bnei Israel were going through the desert, and they said to Ammon and Moab, please let us have water. We'll pay for water and food as we pass through your land. And the Moabites and Ammonites said, no, you cannot have anything from us. And that's almost like against all the conventions of war at the time. If soldiers were nearby, you could offer them food and drink and they would pay for it. And that is perhaps, according to Chazal, why it is the Torah tells us, Lo yovo Ammoni u'Moavi b'kal Hashem. A Moabite and an Ammonite, although they can convert, they are not allowed to marry into the Jewish community because, and the Torah tells us itself, al davar asher lo kidmu eschem ba'lechem u'ba'mayim, because they didn't give you bread and water, the most basic human requirements, ba'derech b'tzeitchem b'mitzrayim. They did not show you hospitality. Lot's descendants were not hospitable. He didn't teach his children, they were his children and his grandchildren, how to behave. Lot had spent many years in the household of his uncle Avraham. He had seen Avraham's way of life. He'd seen his outstanding kindness, his legendary hospitality, and he'd seen his qualities that had made Avraham this great person. Lot instinctively imitated the patterns of Avraham's life. Avraham was kind and hospitable, but these patterns became a habit for Lot. He did not have profound empathy with other people. His acts of kindness were mechanical. What lay underneath was the true nature of Lot. He was greedy and self-centered and intent on self-gratification. And we can see he was insensitive to the needs of others, because although you could argue that when it came to the time when he was in the cave with his daughters, that he got drunk, if it could happen once, but he still allowed himself for it to happen the following night. And his true nature was shown because he went to go and live in a land of Sodom, which were inhospitable. He chose the wrong habitat, which carried on sort of like reinforcing his his inability to be hospitable. He lived in that place. Compared to Sodom, he looked hospitable, but his actions were almost mechanical. So it's very, very interesting. But Lot chose to surround himself by living in Sodom. And the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, the Medrash, tells us, if a man spends time in a perfume shop, he will leave with the scent of perfume clinging to his clothes, even if he didn't make a purchase. And I was thinking about this for the people who were with us in Morocco, because we went to visit a tannery and the shul trip the year before last, I suppose. If a man stays in a tannery, an evil odor will cling to him, even if he is not a tanner by profession. A person who hangs out with not the right people will inevitably be influenced by the people around him. Now, what I wanted to show you now is something which is, it's a very, very short video, and it's by, if you want to watch it yourself, you can look at the QR codes over there. Otherwise, you could just Google it. There was a psychologist called Albert Bandura, and he wrote a theory called social learning theory. And he was very famous. In 1961, he did experiments with children. So he put children in a room with a doll. You'll see it's like a sort of like a inflatable doll that swings around a bit. And the children were watching an adult interacting with the doll. And he did groups of children. And one group of children, he got the adult to like smash the doll in, like hit it, knock it, kick it. And the other ones watched adults behave very nicely. And then they left the child alone with the doll. So I'm going to try and show this video. Let's hope it works out. It's about a minute long. This is from a BBC program, and it's talking about Albert Bandura's life and about the children who didn't see the adults being violent, didn't behave like that at all to the doll. 1 second, just get the words back up. So we see that psychology backs up what Chazal are telling us, that we learn, we are the product of our environment. And we can see that Lot was the product of his environment. And we have the idea also in psychology of twin studies, two children who have got the same genetic inheritance, but have been placed in different environments, and how they can behave differently, and how they can behave differently and how they are different. Sorry, just 1 second. And Lot was the product of his environment. He'd hung around with his uncle Avraham, and he'd learned sort of like mimetically how to behave. So he'd almost like learned the actions, but he never internalized what it is like and how to be hospitable. And I wonder, perhaps in my own life, what things I do that I sort of do mechanically without thinking about it too much. But equally, we can learn from Lot how it's really important to have if we teach other people are watching our actions, that they shouldn't just learn our actions, they should learn the intention behind the action, and not be like a Lot, be more like an Avraham. I want to show you one more thing about the comparison between Avraham and Lot. Lot does everything on his own. And in fact, he says at the end, he says, I've got to protect these men who've come under the shadow of my roof, but Sel Korossi, under my roof. If anybody saw the film War of the Roses years and years ago, it was about this couple getting divorced, and they were like so crazy. They like put sellotape. They didn't want to both move out the house. They sellotaped half the house, and one person lived on that side and one person lived on that side, and woe betide the person who dared cross over. I imagine that's how Lot and his family were living. He was living with his wife. By the way, his wife, according to the Midrash, her name is Iris. But we see in contrast, we don't see anybody else in Lot's story. It's Lot, he offers up his daughters. They don't help with hospitality. But we see Avraham involved, Sarah, she starts making, Ve'el habakar ratz Avraham, and then it says, Vayiten el hana'ar. We see that he also involves his son, Yishmael, and we see that he involves Sarah. Sarah's also involved, whereas Lot is on his own. So we see that the Medrash tells us that Lot's wife was involved, and she went to her next door neighbors and she said, has anybody got any salt? I've got like these unexpected visitors. I don't know what to do. I haven't got enough salt. That's what the Medrash says. And that's why she was later on turned to a pillar of salt. Not only did she not help him with the hospitality, she pretended to help him and made his life miserable, because how is it possible the people of Sodom found out so quickly that these visitors had shown up in Lot's house. Why? Because not only was his wife not hospitable, she was like, what she said to him, what you want to make the awful minhag of sort of inviting visitors into our house. I'll show you, it's the last, the Rashi on Berieshis, right? Why did Lot's wife get turned into a pillar of salt? Rashi says, Ba'melach chata, u'ba'melach lokta. She sinned with salt and she was punished with salt. Omar la, tani ma'at melach la'orchim halalu. She went round to her neighbors and said, anyone got any spare salt? Omar lo, afha minhag hara. Omar lo, she said to him, afha minhag hara hazeh ata ba'a lahan higba makam hazeh. She said to Lot, do you want to introduce this bad custom to our city of inviting guests? So she's like completely not on the same page in any way on the same page as Lot. Lot was hospitable, but his wife wasn't hospitable. Although there is a medrash that one of his daughters risked her life because it says Katsa'ah Kasah, her cry. There's a story that one of Lot's daughters, there was a man who came to live in Sodom and nobody gave him food. And every day they couldn't believe that the man was alive. How did he get bread and water? One day, the people of Sodom said, right, that's it. We're going to watch him all night. And they saw Lot's daughter come out and she gave him bread and water so he would be able to sustain himself. And because of that, they took her, and according to Medrash, it's a horrific story. They took her and they covered her in jam and then let her be stung by bees. And really awful. But we do see a little bit of glimmer of hope that his daughter did get involved in the hospitality. So I hope that can shed some, I'm just going to take myself off. I hope that can shed some interesting perspective over the story of Lot and Avraham and show hospitality. And I know that the handout community and the London community are all amazing people, and I'm proud and honored to be part of the community and carry on all your amazing works, even under these difficult circumstances, to don't be put off, be innovative, and think of ways that you can be hospitable.
Thank you very much, Chava. Really
Thanks
beautiful.
for joining.
Thanks, Chava.
Chava, this is
Very
Gita
much,
Bixen.
Chava.
This is Gita Bixen-Spanner from Montreal. This was an amazing shir. And if you could send me the picture, whatever, all those things that you gave out, it would be awesome.
Thank you for joining. It's middle of the afternoon for you.
Middle of the afternoon, I run home to get your shir.
Oh, thank you very much. Very honored.
Thanks, Chav.
Chava, thank you very much. It was very interesting. Could you tell me the name of the clip that you showed us? Who was it by? The psychologist?
Oh, it was I wish I'll send it to you. It was the guy, it's on the sheet. His name's Albert Bandura.
Okay.
It's the social learning theory. Look under Bobo doll experiment.
Okay. Bobo doll experiment.
B-O, Bobo doll
Okay.
experiment.
Thanks. And I'd also be interested to see the highlights.
Okay, I can send it to you. I've got your phone number.
You've got my email?
I've got your phone
Brilliant.
number. I can send it to you on
Oh,
WhatsApp.
you got my phone number. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Very interesting. I'm glad I finally got to hear one of your shirim. Thanks. Bye.
Anybody else want to make any other comments? By all means, feel free to mute yourself if you'd like.
I want to know when you're giving another shir.
Well, so you can hear the same thing again because I'm going to be giving it in Beverly Hills tomorrow night.
Where in California?
Yeah, well, I'm not really going there. It's just that my brother-in-law usually gives a parasha share, so I told him that I'd do it instead of him today.
Very nice. Really